Top story this week. If you have any anti-nausea medication, take it now, because you may be about to retch into a bucket. Banking update! And Andy, last week we talked a little about the LIBOR scandal, the manipulation of the key banking rate by a handful of complete arseholes, or to give them their numerical term, multimillionaires. It turns out that the entire city of Baltimore is now launching a lawsuit after suffering huge losses due to the manipulation of LIBOR. So luckily it seems like the victims of the LIBOR scandal are mainly going to be restricted to people, places and things. Just nouns, basically. So as long as you don't fall under the noun group, you're going to be walking away from this scandal as happy as a clam. And I remember last week thinking that I was disappointed with myself to think that the behaviour of banks had bottomed out, only for the LIBOR scandal to prove I was wrong. And did I learn from that? No, Andy, I did not, because I thought, well, LIBOR will be the depth of it now, at least for a few months. How wrong I was, because just 1 week later, it has emerged that HSBC Bank has been found to have, among other things, laundered a huge amount of money for Mexican drug cartels. Is this the bottom, Andy? Have we at least bottomed out now? Or are we going to find out next week that banks have been kidnapping children and harvesting them for fuel? Because if we did, I would be surprised, sure, but I guess not that surprised anymore. Because if it turned out that Barclays was operating secret orphan fuel factories, it would at least seem morally consistent.
And also, if it knocked a quarter of a point off my interest payments, who am I to criticise them, John? I mean, it's a
Let the market decide.
Let the market decide. Let the market
decide, Andy. Unleash the market. She's hungry.
Well, as you say, as the old saying goes, the darkest hour is right before the dawn. So could this actually be the exciting new dawn of a new era of morally infused banking? Well, the fact is, it does appear that global mega finance actually really likes being in the darkest hour. It makes them feel all horny. And they've also spent a lot of money developing an industrial blindfold, so they can just keep it going that extra bit longer.
Also, it's worth noting, it wasn't just Mexican drug cartels that were funneling money through HSBC. HSBC were also apparently channeling money for rogue nations such as Iran and Syria. Apparently, from 2001 to 2007, MSNBC affiliates sent almost 25,000 transactions involving Iran, worth over $19 billion through HBUS and other US accounts, while concealing any link with Iran in 85% of those transactions. It also emerged that they may have been dealing with a Saudi bank known to have channeled money for Al-Qaeda. Now, you see, that is going to hit a bit of a nerve here in America, Andy, where the relationship with Iran and terrorists has been, at best, strained, and dates such as 2001 are at best poignant.
But, I mean, the other side of looking at this, John, is that if we don't let drug cartels and rogue nations and international terror groups use mainstream banking facilities, well, then we're just going to push them underground, John. This is all clearly part of a trap to lure them in with promises, like banks do with new customers. Lure them in with promises of like a free sports hold-all or a £20 record token if they open a new student savings account. And bang! Next thing you know, you've got Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's address, phone number, mother's maiden name and the name of his first pet. And then you've got him by the balls, John. You've got him by his financial balls. Ahmadinejad's first pet was a little goldfish called Lucy.
You can't say that, Andy. That has just completely ruined all his password encryption now. He's a bad man, Andy, but he deserves some kind of internet secrecy. On Tuesday at a US Senate hearing, the HSBC's head of compliance, David Bugle, resigned in the middle of the questioning. But let's not make that a noble act. Let's not mistake it for a noble act, Andy. Falling on your sword is only noble if you are someone who doesn't fully deserve to have a sword inside your stomach. And announcing that he's leaving at a hearing into HSBC's wrongdoing, Andy, is like the captain of the Titanic saying he's going to take a sabbatical from sailing for a while after suddenly hearing a crunching sound outside the ship.
What was more, after suddenly realising that 90% of his ship is underwater.
That's true. You're right, I got the timing all wrong there.
Senator Carl Levin described...
It's after seeing a violinist float past him.
It's when you're standing in the bar trying to order a drink next to a shark. You know that you've left it too long. Senator Carl Levin described HSBC's lack of controls at its US and overseas units as a recipe for trouble. And this is not just any recipe, John. This is a recipe as reliable as my carbonara recipe for guaranteeing that you get exactly the dish you want, bang on the banana, every time. I'm describing a lack of controls and this kind of thing as a recipe for trouble. Well, yes, it generally is. That's why we have controls on things. For example, we have controls on strangling people with cheese wire if they annoy you during a snooker match. Controls on the number of babies you're allowed to try to throw through a basketball hoop, generally set at 0 currently in most countries. And controls on whether or not you're allowed to dip your testicles in a cathedral font during midnight mass and shout, "I've got magic sperms now." These are the kind of controls that the human being needs, John, because we have an innate human impulse to be a dick. I mean, look at the ancient Greek gods. No controls, wandered around doing all kinds of extremely naughty and deeply perverted stuff. It's the same with big banks, John. Watch and learn the banking sector on your barely regulated Mount Olympus of amorality. Watch and learn, because you might be able to turn yourself into a shower of rain and hump someone, but it doesn't mean you have to do it.
The chief executive of HSBC's US department, Irene Dorner, who must absolutely love going into work at the moment, She apologised to the Senate committee, I quote, for the fact that HSBC did not live up to the expectations of our regulators, our customers, our employees and the general public. You see, you got that wrong, Irene. HSBC didn't just live up to everyone's expectations nowadays, they vastly exceeded them. I now am just wired to expect bank to be duplicitous crooks, but to be in league with Mexican drug cartels. Oh, bravo, HSBC. I don't think anyone saw that coming, and the fact that that is so true is clearly part of the problem.
And as always with deep regretting in the mega business world, I think what Irene Dorner probably meant was that she deeply regretted HSBC being found out and made public. And you can be pretty sure, John, in any controversy involving banking ethics, that the financial moral compass is pointing directly at the Cayman Islands.
Yes.
The islands that put the hay into tax haven. And in this case, John, it emerged that HSBC did not even have customer information on 41% of the accounts held with it in the Cayman Islands.
Shit.
That, to me, John, that shows a certain lack of curiosity on behalf of HSBC. Roughly equivalent to being a parent and having a baby and not bothering to find out whether it's a boy or a girl until it's 34 years old, and you have to ask it whether it's very, very pregnant or has just put on a bit of weight in the last 9 months.
Having no customer information whatsoever for 41% of your customers, Andy, is not just a red flag. That is a red flag attached to an alarm bell attached to a dead canary. I just don't know how many more signs you need.
The bank has said it's in the process of closing down 20,000 accounts in the Cayman Islands as a result of the investigation. And this is yet another case, John, of a bank trying to shoot the horse after the door has bolted, in the immortal words of the West Indian cricket legend Viv Richards. Clearly a man with his finger on the global economic pulse.
That's such a great quote. Clearly, there are big questions also about regulation and oversight, as the report also implicated the US Treasury Department's Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is supposed to police things like money laundering, and they were indicted for failing to step in earlier. Senator Tom Coburn said that the OCC had acted as, I quote, a lapdog, not a watchdog, by failing to catch HSBC in the act. But again, they're not seeing this the right way, Andy. The OCC haven't just been a lapdog, they've been a lap dancer, grinding on top of bankers in the hopes that they'll stuff some money into their fiscal G-strings. One interesting side note to these banking scandals at the moment, Andy, is that they all have one thing in common. The LIBOR scandal, based in Britain. The HSBC scandal, based in Britain. This is a high-end low point for Britain, Andy. We should be proud of the amounts that we should be ashamed at the moment. Because with the banking scandals, the BP oil disaster and the phone hacking scandal, you could make a very coherent case that British businessmen are the most cartoonishly evil people in the whole world. And you know that the US is going to respond in every way they can, Andy. And you can expect Hollywood to once more make British people the villains in all their movies. Put it this way, Alan Rickman is about to get a lot of job offers. You're going to see him. Yeah, you're going to see both of us in a lot of movies with us twirling our moustaches in a swivel chair with a hairless cat in our lap and a bazooka over our shoulder before Vin Diesel bursts in and kicks both of us in the face. All I'm saying is these scandals have real-world consequences, Andy.
And the problem with this, John, is, we've got the Olympics now as we record on Friday. The opening ceremony is 1 week and a few hours away. That the logistical problems that will inevitably arise with the transport around the city are going to be further exacerbated by the fact that the entire city of London has basically become the world's biggest crime scene and is going to be surrounded by police tape while they bag and label it and pack it off to forensics.
I think to get trust back, at least some trust, HSBC are clearly going to need to increase their transparency. So when you go to a cash machine in the street and you type the amount of money that you want onto the screen, it should then flash up saying, you'll be charged $3 for this transaction. Would you still like to continue? Yes. That $3 might end up in the hands of a Mexican drug cartel. Would you still like to continue? I guess, yes. Even though the Mexican drug cartels are routinely murdering law enforcement officials and turning parts of their country into a war zone, still want to continue? I want to say no, but yes. What about if part of the $3 ended up in Iran? Continue? Yes. Which would be illegal. Continue? Yes. How about Syria, who are, as we speak, murdering their own people in the street? Continue? No. Really? Don't you want this money? Yes. Exactly. Shut up then. Here's your $20. Would you like a receipt to remind you of this conversation? No. Didn't think so. Goodbye.
I guess in an industry driven by money and therefore in large parts by human greed or tax havenality, if you will, this behaviour is hardly surprising. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what excuses HSB comes up with apart from the classic, sorry, my dog ate all of everyone's account details, and what happened? We were busy fixing a broken cash point between 2002 and 2009. Did something go wrong somewhere? And of course, the more traditional banking excuse of, sorry, you'll have to say that a bit louder, I just don't give a f***.